Yeah, the Eastern and Southern African region were beneficiaries of $873 million food systems resilience phase 1 program of the FAO Investment Center, as reported back in September of 2023. Now, that program, which comes under the $2.3 billion World Bank Finance Initiative, was designed to support the region, which is home to over 650 million people hurting from acute and chronic food insecurity. Now let's get more insight from this panel of experts on how much more can be done to build a resilient and sustainable agri-food systems in sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, the issue of financing is complex. You talk about there's capital, but there's no capital. It's a question of access to capital. The amount are not enough. And we also talk about where the money is going, whether the money is going to the right sector. What is IFAD's role in there? We call it the financing agenda for food system transformation. That's what the UN system calls it. If you take the Africa region, the African Union assessed that it will take about $76 billion a year until 2030 to finance food system transformation. What are we talking about? Putting in place the infrastructure, putting in place the technology, land development, capacity building, all this has been assessed, and there is a financing gap for that. It's where the money has to come from. So basically, what are we talking about when it comes to financing? Again, we have to refer to data, to refer to evidence. You take the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, they assess that it will take about 40% of the GDP of least developed countries to finance food systems that are functional, 40% of the GDP. You imagine the magnitude of resources that are required. And we are talking of the least developed countries, the 48, out of which 33 are Africans. So basically the resources, the domestic resources to finance this are not available. And this is why the strategy in African countries, it's a combination of resources. The domestic resource mobilization coming from the government, the development partners, I mean, you have the United Arab Emirates, you have the OECD countries, you have the other emerging economies, which have to be mobilized to back up domestic resources, making sure that it's a mutual partnership, and it's also about private sector investment. So the challenge in these countries is to bring together domestic national resources together with those of the development partners and those in the investors in a complementary manner, in a 360 manners, so that the different parts of the food system can be financed. Because what is sure is that domestic resource mobilization is not enough, development assistance is not enough, and private sector money has to be incentivized. It has to be put in a secure environment where the private sector is willing to come. And this is what IFAD is striving to do, to work with the government to create this environment and make the connection between domestic resource, development partners, private sector, and also making sure that these benefit the small producers, the traders, the women, the youth, that the money reach these frontline workers with capacity building and access to finance.
The Africa food system, you have a platform that convenes players from policymakers to investors to civil society organizations. What do you see are some of the opportunities to help address some of the points raised by Nadine on the financing side? Not enough funding in one place, but we can come together and you mobilize those players together. What are the opportunities? How AFS can play its role in addressing that?
But again, I start by saying Africa is a land of opportunity. So the narrative of issues, problem is everywhere. So we are all facing problem. Risk is everywhere. It's just a problem of how do you perceive it and how do you de-risk. Okay. At the end of the day, even in a situation of conflict, you still have opportunity to make money. People will still need to eat. So, and that's not the case. We have issues now everywhere. That's one. Second is, let me focus on youth. It's a very young continent and they are very innovative. Digitalization has changed the way we do business in Africa, with this 70% of the population that have less than 35 years old. It's a workforce, and they are just looking for opportunities to make things work. So one of those challenges which they are facing is, of course, investment. Because when you are young, there is still gap in terms of skills. So there is this perception that maybe things will not work. But capacity building will, help us leapfrog. So when we meet at the Africa Food System Forum, we are bringing all the players across the food system value chain. That's why we rebranded it. Initially, it was called Agricultural Green Revolution Forum. So in 2021-2022, with the Food System Summit and this global agenda, we said we are not going to solve the problem only with agriculture sector, those who are in agriculture, but it's food. At the end of the day, the final product is food. So it starts with input. Those who are in research, academia, they have to be here. Second, those who produce, farmers, young people, women, all of them, the processors, value addition, branding, because we have now a very critical mass of consumers, and it's shifting in the big cities in Africa. They want fine products, but also if you want to export, at the end of the day, you need also to meet standards.